All right, today we're jumping into Surah Al-Baqarah, which is the second and, famously, the longest chapter of the Quran. But its length isn't just about the page count, it's really about its sheer scope. Honestly, you can think of it less like a single chapter and more like a foundational constitution for a whole new society. And yeah, at 286 verses, this chapter is a massive undertaking. It's basically a blueprint for how to build a community from the ground up, and it covers everything from faith and worship to social justice and law. So to get a handle on how all these pieces fit together, we're going to explore 5 of its central themes. So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the chapter's own mission statement, what it actually means to be a source of guidance. Then we'll see how people react to that guidance, splitting humanity into 3 pretty clear groups. After that, we'll dive into the famous parable of the cow to see faith in action, or maybe inaction. Then we'll zoom out to look at the lessons learned from past nations before tying it all together to really get a grip on the core message of submission that underpins the whole thing. Right from the very beginning, the chapter makes this incredibly powerful declaration. It essentially says, look, this isn't a book of myths or legends. It presents itself as a source of undeniable truth, and it's got one clear purpose: to guide. But who is this guidance, or hidayat, for? Well, the chapter is very specific. It's for the parhezgaran, which means the pious, the mindful, or the God-conscious. And this is a really crucial distinction. The text isn't presenting itself as some kind of tool for converting skeptics, but more like a roadmap for people who are already searching for the right path. So what does one of these God-fearing people actually look like? The narrative lays out a very clear profile, and it's not about just blind faith, it's a whole worldview. These are people who believe in the unseen, the ghaib, but they don't just believe it, they act on it, through prayer and through charity. And super importantly, they see this revelation as just one part of a long, continuous chain of divine messages, all of it leading to a final accountability in the hereafter. Okay, so if the guidance is laid out so clearly, how do people respond to it? Well, the chapter wastes no time and immediately presents this spectrum of human reaction, basically sorting everyone into 3 very distinct categories based on how they engage with the divine message. So the first 2 responses are complete polar opposites. On one side, you have the believers, who are just set on a path to success. Their acceptance of the message is their guide. But on the other side, you've got the disbelievers, who are described as being fundamentally unreachable. The text uses this really striking image, saying that a seal has been placed on their hearts and on their hearing, making the message totally inaccessible to them. But then, the chapter dedicates a lot of space to a third, much more complicated group, the hypocrites. And this isn't about open rejection. It's about a kind of concealed rejection. They say all the right things, we believe, but their actions tell a totally different story. We're told they have a disease in their hearts. The fact that so much attention is paid to them suggests that this was a major, real-world challenge for that new community, figuring out how to deal with insincerity from people who claim to be on their side. And now we get to the story that gives this entire, massive chapter its name. It seems like a pretty simple story on the surface, but it's really a powerful case study on the nature of faith, obedience, and, well, hesitation. So, the story kicks off when the prophet Moses delivers a crystal-clear command from God to his people. As you see here, it's just, Allah commands you to sacrifice a cow. Simple, direct, no ambiguity. But their response is anything but simple. Instead of just obeying, there's immediate suspicion. Are you mocking us? They ask. Instead of taking action, they just start asking endless questions. And with every answer Moses gives them, they just come back with another question, looking for more and more specific details. What's she like? Okay, but what's her color? They just keep complicating the command, and in doing so, they reveal this deep-seated reluctance to just trust and obey. So finally, after all of their back and forth, the description becomes incredibly specific, which of course makes their job way harder than it needed to be. They're told to find a cow that's not old but not young, a brilliant yellow color, and one that has never ever been used for plowing or watering fields. The text says they do eventually carry out the command, but then it adds that they were very close to not doing it at all. The whole parable is a lesson. Their hesitation nearly caused them to fail completely. This story about reluctance, it isn't just a one-off anecdote. It actually serves as a perfect lead-in to a much, much larger theme in the chapter, this repeated pattern of a community wrestling with divine commands throughout its entire history. So the chapter dedicates a huge portion of its real estate to the history of the Bani Israel, or the children of Israel. But these aren't just dry historical retellings. They're presented as really vivid case studies, almost like a series of cautionary tales meant for the new community being addressed. And what we see in these accounts is this recurring cycle. First, God bestows these immense favors on them, right? Saving them from Pharaoh, parting the sea. A covenant is established. But what happens next? A major transgression. They start worshiping the golden calf. But here's the crucial part. The cycle doesn't end in doom and gloom. It ends with an opportunity for repentance, which, when they take it, leads to divine forgiveness. And the narrative keeps coming back to this direct call. It's a constant reminder to remember that history of blessings and salvation. And it's not meant to make them feel guilty, but to encourage them to uphold their end of the bargain. That history is the very foundation for their present and future relationship with God, one based on remembering and fulfilling their promises. Okay, so after looking at all these different responses to faith and the deep historical lessons from past nations, what's the ultimate point? Where is this all going? Well, this is where the chapter pulls all those different threads together into one final, powerful, overarching message. The key takeaways really boil down to these core principles: the unwavering, absolute oneness of God, the idea that real faith is active, not passive, something you do, not just something you say, the incredible value of obedience, which was powerfully illustrated in the parable of the cow, and finally, a strong sense of personal accountability. Past communities are responsible for their choices, and you are responsible for yours. Simple as that. And this all builds up to a really profound definition. The chapter frames the word Islam not as a religious label you wear, but as an action. It's a verb, the verb of submission. It's that sincere, wholehearted act of aligning your own will with God's will. And this, the text argues, is the timeless principle that connects the faith of all the prophets, from Abraham right up to the message being delivered now. And so, we end right back where we started. The chapter opens by declaring that it is guidance. After 286 verses of stories, laws, and principles, we're left with this question. The narrative makes it clear that guidance can be offered, but how it's received depends entirely on the heart of the listener. Will it be met with the simple acceptance of the believers, the outright rejection of the disbelievers, or that complicated, questioning hesitation of the people with the cow? The guidance is there, but the choice the text implies is always yours.